So now what we're going to do is we're going to go through the Notice of Understanding and Intent and Claim of Right. Before I get into this document, I'm going to first explain what this is and how this process works. When you study law, the way I heard someone describe it best is law, because we're all equals, you're not to ask permission for anything. You're to notice somebody of what your actions or intentions are. They then, to stay in honor, communicate back with you, and if you want to do it in a way that's legally binding, you do it with certified mail. Now, what you need to do in order to set up a claim of right is you need to do a notice of understanding and intent. Now, what that entails is 2 letters that you write or type and send. Letter 1 is whoever you're engaging, whether it's Stephen Harper's office, the government, police, probation officers, creditors, any kind of legal paperwork process that you want to talk to someone with, you send them a letter first asking questions. By what authority are you asking me for this? You say I owe this amount of money. Do you have a contract? You can outline whatever questions that you want in it. If for some reason they do not respond within the given period of time, which is about two business weeks, you then have the right, because they're in dishonor. Law is all about staying in honor as well. It's about noticing someone of your intent and staying in honor. How you stay in honor is through communicating. So when you send this letter asking the other people questions, if they don't get back to you, they're in dishonor. So they've lost their right to participate in the conversation. So then if they don't get back to you, you have the right to answer your own questions. Those answers, they then have again another opportunity to respond to when you send them to them. But if they don't, that creates a binding understanding that you can then use to set up a claim of right. Now, the first notice of understanding and intent and claim of right that our society did, we did that. We did letter 1 with the questions, letter 2 with the answers, and then we served the claim of right with our child of God status notices and our creation of a new society notices. Now, the claim of right I'm about to go through with you, the notice of understanding and intent and the claim of right, is the second one we did. So we did this in addition to the other one. You can view all of them on our website. The first one has some technical incorrectness to it, which the second one is a lot better. Even the second one, so you know, I'm going to read you what's in here, but we're in the process of developing a new version of this that we'll be sending later this year that you'll want to study. So if you're learning either our first or second one, do not necessarily use them on your own without really researching or talking to us first, because we will have a more updated version later this year. But within that, this is still really good for understanding, and it still contains what you're going to need to understand to know what we're talking about. So again, you may have questions at the end. As I go through it, write down questions, email them to us. So this is our notice of understanding and intent and claim of right. It lists the affidavit number and the proof of service number. Affidavit number is your sworn testimony that you did in fact send this to whoever you said you did. You can use 3 witnesses in the public or a notary, depending on how you're setting things up. And then a proof of service number, which is the number on certified mail. You get a little stub, and that number proves that you did in fact send it to them. It says 2, we sent it to Stephen Harper's office. This notice of understanding and intent and claim of right is in addition to already established notices of understanding and intent and claim of right documents already existing with the force of law for Peacemaker Society members as listed below. And then we list the next, the previous 2 that we served, the letter 1 with the questions and the letter 2 where we answered them and sent them, and the claim of right. The claim of right has the force of law September 3rd in the year of 2009, our first one. And then here is the actual beginning of this now. Whereas it is my understanding that Canada is a common law jurisdiction, and, pause there for 1 second, whereas, it's going to say whereas a bunch, and what that means is it's a statement of fact. It's something that should be commonly understood. I'm going to continue now. Whereas it is my understanding that equality before the law is paramount and mandatory, and whereas it is my understanding that a statute is defined as a legislated rule of a society which has been given the force of law, and whereas it is my understanding that a society is defined as a number of people joined by mutual consent to deliberate, determine, and act for common goals, and whereas it is my understanding that the only form of government recognized as lawful in Canada is a representative one, and whereas it is my understanding that representation requires mutual consent, and whereas it is my understanding that in the absence of mutual consent, neither representation nor governance can exist, and whereas it is my understanding that all acts or statutes restricted in scope and applicability by the Constitution and or Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and or the Corporations Act, and whereas it is my understanding that said scope and applicability is limited to members and employees of the government, and whereas, try and rhythmically block out the and whereas part. Actually, from this point on, know that at the end of every line it says and whereas, and I'm just going to read the lines to save us both having to listen to that all the way through this, and I'm going to take a sip of my tea here, hold on. Okay. It is my understanding that those who have a social insurance number are in fact employees of the Canadian government and thus are bound by the statutes created by the Canadian government. It is my understanding that it is lawful to abandon one's social insurance number. It is my understanding that a human being in Canada have a right to revoke or deny consent to be represented and thus governed. It is my understanding that if anyone does revoke or deny consent, they exist free of government control and statutory restraints. Whereas a sovereign child of God, natural person, and free man on the land have lawfully revoked consent and does exist free of statutory restrictions, obligations, and limitations. Whereas I, Marcel Riley Bessette, am a natural human being, sovereign child of God, it is my understanding that acting peacefully within community standards does not breach the peace. It is my understanding that any action for which one can apply for and receive a license must fundamentally be a lawful action. Whereas I am not a child, whereas I am a natural human being, sovereign child of God, flesh and blood man, who operates with full responsibility, I do not see the need to ask permission to engage in lawful and peaceful activities, especially from those who claim limited liability. It is my understanding that a bylaw is defined as a rule of a corporation. It is my understanding that corporations are legal fictions and require contracts in order to claim any authority or control over other parties. It is my understanding that legal fictions lack a soul and cannot exert any control over those who are thus blessed and operate with respect to that knowledge, as only a fool would allow a soulless entity, a soulless fiction to dictate one's actions. It is my understanding that I have a right to use my property without having to pay for the use or enjoyment of it. It is my understanding that I claim the right to collect a pension and retain ownership of any trust or birth trust that is held in trust for me or on my behalf by any government agent or employee thereof, if I had paid into it, and claim that said right is not affected if I abandon my social insurance number. It is my understanding that a summons is merely an invitation to attend and creates no obligation or dishonor if ignored. It is my understanding that peace officers have a duty to distinguish between statute and law, and those who attempt to enforce statutes against flesh and blood men and women, natural human beings, sovereign child of God, or a free man on the land, are in fact breaking the law. I have the power to refuse intercourse or interaction with peace officers who have not observed me breach the peace. Whereas permanent estoppel by acquiescence, barring any peace officer or prosecutor from bringing charges against a flesh and blood man, natural human being, or sovereign child of God, or free man on the land, under any act is created if this claim is not responded to in this stated fashion and time. Therefore, be it known to any and all concerned and affected parties that I, Marcel Riley Bessette, a natural human being, flesh and blood man, sovereign child of God, do hereby state clearly, specifically, and unequivocally my intention to peacefully and lawfully exist free of all statutory obligations, restrictions, and maintain all rights at law to trade, exchange, or barter. Furthermore, I claim the right to lawfully 1. Exercise my common law right to travel, unhindered, unencumbered, at my discretion in my private conveyance of the day, to wit, my private, unregistered, unlicensed automobile. Pause. An automobile is your private conveyance. A vehicle is a commercial vehicle that needs to be licensed, and you only describe it that way if you're earning a living in it. Then it's a vehicle. If you're just traveling, it's an automobile. Unpause. Number 2, exercise my God-given right to travel as stated in the Queen's Bible. 3, exercise my common law right to refuse to obtain by submission any application for any government-issued license, permit, or seek permission to perform any fundamentally lawful action of, or enter into any government contract under duress, threat, and/or intimidation which would involve committing an act of fraud and/or theft, or any other crime by way of deception by I and/or any involved government principals, employees, or agents, in compliance with my common law rights, natural human being unalienable rights, and the Magna Carta, etc. 4, exercise my right to possess, cultivate, buy, grow, sell, give away, process, alter in any form, or use at any time any plant or processed plant in the genus cannabis. That does mean marijuana, regardless of how you feel on the issue. Again, if you're not harming anyone, if you are sitting there smoking marijuana, or doing any drug for that matter. I'm not promoting drugs though, especially hard drugs. I'm against them personally. But within that, you have the right. Until you harm someone, it is not an unlawful act. It's illegal, but that only applies to corporations and people who consent to that kind of governance. If you're a free, lawful human being, it is a human right to smoke, use, grow, sell marijuana. Just as a fact in law, regardless of how anyone feels about it. Within that, I'm not trying to push any agenda. If you're adamantly against marijuana, I encourage that to be your choice in your life. And within that, I'm going to continue on. I claim that pursuant to any action by any government and/or any principal, member, employee, agent, servant, person thereof in right of Canada, a province, or municipality, I reserve my right not to be compelled to perform under any contract or commercial agreement that I did not enter knowingly, voluntarily, and intentionally, and I do not accept the liability of the compelled benefit of any contract or commercial agreement not revealed to myself, which are my rights pursuant to common law. Furthermore, I claim the right to engage in these actions, and further claim that all property held by me under common law, being any and all intellectual property, real estate, trade tools, private automobiles, and contents, potted plants, contents at the privately posted residence known as, privately known address, you just list your address there, are held under claim of right. Furthermore, I claim that the Crown's claim of estate to the Crown or the Duchy of Lancaster or the Duke of Cornwall or the Mesney Lord of Want of Heirs, as referred to in the Administration of Estates Act 1925, stands as a lawful claim, and whereas Canada is in insolvency, an estate where everything is owned by God and currently held in trust and or the Crown until a competent heir appears and lays a lawful claim of jurisdiction. In Canada, it's under the Sheriff's Act. Furthermore, I claim that the intentional blurring of the lines with smoke and mirrors, deception, outright lies, and too numerous to mention false claims as to the well-settled division between the Crown-created legal entity known as the person and the flesh and blood creation of the Creator known as a man is nothing short of theft, fraud, breach of trust, and forced slavery, a heinous criminal activity of the most odious form. Furthermore, I claim that all persons acting as governments, principals, employees, agents, and justice system participants claiming retained legal counsel have by virtue of their own and or their principals' actions claimed total incompetence in handling any of their own affairs in law and have become an instant ward of the court. Hence, they are imprisoned by their own actions in hand or lack thereof. Pause. Lawyers, government, everyone operates under limited liability. Limited liability means you're incompetent commercially, or you would be fully liable for your actions and operate under full commercial liability. Unpause. Furthermore, I claim that due to the self-evident facts and truth at hand, that all persons, the Crown, governments, principals, employees, agents, and justice system participants claiming limited liability or immunity are doing so under the presence of being, in fact, totally incompetent and under law made instant wards of the Crown and or court, and therefore cannot claim good faith or color of right over anyone who is thus blessed as being a competent heir. Furthermore, I claim that ignorance of the law is not a lawful or legal claim when used by the Crown, government principals, employees, agents, and justice system participants at any and all levels to my harm or detriment, especially by those claiming limited liability. Pause. What I'm going to explain here is if you talk to police and ask them the difference between legal and lawful, from my own experience, most do not know. When you ask your lawyer, they do know, but they swear an oath not to discuss that with you because it diminishes the state's control over you. There is a conscious effort through judges, lawyers, police, government, as well as how they're regulated, that some don't understand how it works because of how they're regulated, and others do, but they profit so much from it, they keep it their own little secret, and they swear an oath not to tell us, and they honestly can't, unless they abandon their whole profession. And anyway, unpause. Furthermore, I claim that these actions are not outside my community standards and will in fact support said comments and our desire for truth and maximum freedom. Furthermore, I claim that anyone who interferes with my lawful activities after having been served notice of this claim and who fails to properly dispute or make counterclaim, lawful counterclaim, is breaking the law, cannot claim good faith or color of right, and that such transgressions will be dealt with in a properly convened court de jure. Pause. Court de jure means a lawful court properly set up on the land. We have de facto courts right now, which means they exist by fact. They are not lawfully established or set up, and it is only because people don't understand how it works that they even still exist the way they do. They are a commercial court. We're not going to go into that more right now, but we'll get into it later. But there's no innocent plea. Guilty or not guilty. It's not a civil court. Commercial court. Okay, unpause. Furthermore, I claim that the courts in Canada are de facto, or in fact in the profitable business of conducting witnessing and facilitating the transactions of security interests, and I further claim that they require the consent of both parties prior to providing any such services. Furthermore, I claim all transactions of security interests require the consent of both parties, and I do hereby deny consent to any transaction of a security interest issuing under any act, for herein states, as a sovereign child of God and a flesh and blood man, I am not subject to any act. Furthermore, I claim my fee schedule for any transgressions by peace officers, government principals or agents, or justice system participants. My fee schedule is the Peacemaker Society fee schedule. This is notice to whom it may concern. This fee schedule applies to any member of Peacemaker Society who is unlawfully ordered to do anything by any police officer, government agent for any reason. This is notice that all orders from government agents or police officers are from this moment on known to be accepted under protest and duress with all rights reserved. This fee schedule is law under claim of right for all Peacemaker Society members. It applies even if the Peacemaker Society member was unable to serve a bill upon the police officers who enforced that order unlawfully. The police officers enforcing acts and statutes under the belief that these bylaws, etc., somehow apply to our Peacemaker Society members are committing gross negligence, which is equal to fraud under the law. Peacemaker Society fee schedule is as follows: $2,000 an hour to talk to a police after I am a Peacemaker Society member, $10,000 an hour while under an unlawful order or arrest. If there is no injured party, then under Peacemaker Society law, the person who is in question is being arrested under an order which is unlawful. Any police officer who enforces statutes as law is committing gross negligence, which is equal to fraud. It also means they have abandoned their bond under maritime law. The fact that police officers who take an oath to protect and serve Canadians are blatantly violating Canadians' rights with this kind of abuse disturbs our society greatly, which is why $10,000 an hour is perfectly reasonable and equitable for our society members to be paid. $2,000 an hour we are ordered to appear at the Law Society courts or courts of Queen Bench upon their order, even if it is to speak to a matter to which a fictional straw man is being ordered to appear. $20 per gram of marijuana unlawfully seized by any government agent, employee, or police officer in any member of our society's home. This fee schedule is law and has the force of law for each member of the Peacemaker Society who have sworn to and are bound by the official Peacemaker Society oath. Once any member of the Peacemaker Society has signed his or her Peacemaker Society oath, this fee schedule will be active and apply to that society member from that moment on, or portion thereof, if being questioned, interrogated, or in any way detained, harassed, searched, or otherwise regulated, and or portion thereof if I am handcuffed, transported, incarcerated, or subjected to any adjudication process without my express, written, and verified, witnessed, or notarized consent. Furthermore, I claim the right to use 3 Peacemaker Society verifiers as valid proof of contract and or witness signature be recognized as equal to any law society notary in order to have a justice of the peace or sheriff issue an order to secure payment for aforementioned fee schedule against any transgressors who by their actions or omissions harm me or my interests directly or by proxy in any way. I'm going to pause here for a quick explanation. People always hear due process, due process. It means you have the right to act in your life without arbitrary interference by police or government. If they don't witness you firsthand harm someone or something, they're forcibly contracting corporate law on you. They're not acting as a peace officer, and that's why they're violating your rights. If that doesn't make sense yet, it'll make more sense as you study this later, so I'm going to unpause again. Furthermore, I claim the right to have any and all Peacemaker Society notices of understanding and intent and claim of right documents apply to every member of the Peacemaker Society upon a Peacemaker Society member signing his or her society oath. I claim the right to have 3 or more Peacemaker Society verifiers or witnesses be recognized as equal to any law society notary in witnessing and attesting to flesh and blood men and women's natural human beings' right to exercise their right of private contract and resolution through the administrative remedies available to the free people of the land. Pause. Administrative remedies means you have the right to have people prove they actually have a real valid contract against you if you owe them money, supposedly. Unpause. Furthermore, I claim the right that verifiers and witnesses have the legal authority to witness, attest, send, with a cover titled Proof of Mailing and Contents Mailed, witnessing the sending of documents sent registered mail via verifier and witness presentment, being the third-party witness or verifier to third-party witness to the response or non-response, and to, upon request, send as a courteous reminder both a notice of non-response and an instrument of protest, and will attest the truth of any deeds or other writings to render the same more credible and authentic in anything relating to the private rights of flesh and blood men and women or natural human beings to private contract, as these rights are guaranteed by the Constitution of Canada with its entrenched Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and these charters are the supreme law of the land, also in the Canadian Bill of Rights. It's also just throughout history and law. Furthermore, I claim the right to convene proper courts de jure in order to address any potential criminal actions of any peace officers, government principals, or agents, or justice system participants who, having been served notice of this claim, failed to dispute or discuss or make lawful counterclaim, and then interfere by act or omission with the lawful exercise of properly claimed and properly established rights and freedoms. Furthermore, I claim the right to have all Peacemaker Society founding members recognized as diplomats of Peacemaker Society, and to have the Peacemaker Society founding members be protected by diplomatic immunity. That is a real thing. Furthermore, I claim that the law of agent and principal does apply, and that service upon one is equal to service upon both. Pause. What that means is when you serve Stephen Harper, say for example paperwork, it's his job to actually make sure everyone under him gets a copy of that. They don't always do it. In our next round, we're going to be serving every office individually just to make sure that they do in fact receive it. Unpause. Furthermore, I claim the right to deal with any counterclaim or disputes publicly and in an open forum using discussion and negotiation, and to capture on video recording device said discussions and negotiations for whatever lawful purpose I see fit. Affected parties wishing to dispute the claims made herein or make their own counterclaims must respond appropriately within 10 days of service of notice of this action. Response must be under oath or attestation upon full commercial liability and penalty of perjury and registered in the verifier witness office herein, provided no later than 10 days from the date of original service, as attested to by way of proof of mailing. Failure to register and dispute against the claims made herein will result in an automatic default judgment and permanent and irrevocable estoppel by acquiescence, barring the bringing of charges under any statute or act against myself, a flesh and blood man or woman, natural human being, sovereign child of God, and or free man on the land. This claim of right is established at the city of Winnipeg in the province of Manitoba in the geographical location known as the Dominion of Canada. Dated this would have been in September last year, 2010, and then just name and verifiers and witnesses. This is just a copy, which is why I don't have the dates in there. We do have the original. There's a lot of information in there. I hope most of that made sense. Again, if you go through your notes, any questions you have, we can send you a simple explanation. This is just designed so you have a good understanding once we go through this. Again, you're going to be representing us in your area. It's very important. Sorry if any of that was dry, but it is exciting. Knowledge is power. That is the knowledge that is real power. So you have it now. Learn it, love it, and I'll see you in the next segment.